So please welcome Cory Muscara to the show. Welcome, Cory.
Thanks, Ashley. Hey, everyone.
Oh, Cory, like I said before I hit record, it's been just an absolute joy to read your book, Stop Missing Your Life, going down, Instagram, reading your website, um, listening to YouTube. I love it's just so fun when I know that I knew like a couple months ago we had this planned and I get ready like a few days before and I'm just like absorbed you. Like I know you. And it's just, when someone comes into your life like you to me, and I know that there's a reason, and I know that I'm supposed to learn something from you. There's definitely a higher perspective when there's a higher purpose in this connection. And I look at people like that, especially having a podcast or reading a book, and like, what does this book come into my life for? Like and what I learned from you was thinking about like where you started and your childhood. Like, it wasn't a struggling childhood. You had a beautiful family, beautiful childhood.
Mhm.
And it came to this place where I want you to start is this girlfriend in college because I feel like I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, and I'm thinking of their childhood as I reflect on yours and thinking of mine and what I did as a mom to, you know, change what I thought would be a better, like in my mind, right? Like, well, I didn't have that, so I'm going to give him this. Or I know I'm programming them. I was an older parent, so I was very aware of what I was like programming and 0 to 7 and all the things that, I was getting Richard on you got to, they have these limiting beliefs. You got to talk about, all the things. But when I look at your life and I think of how I can't wait for people to understand what you've done, um, I see the little breadcrumbs kind of like um, pointing to the direction that you've taken in your life, I guess I could say. But can you kind of go off of that
Yeah,
lead?
that particular breadcrumb. Yeah. Um, yeah, it's an interesting story and also predictable in some ways. I think when a lot of people think of someone who starts a journey like I've been on, which we'll get into, but let's just say like a spiritual journey or one of um, wanting to understand meditation and mindfulness on a deeper level. A lot of times you might think that that person they must already be spiritual, inclined in that direction, or maybe there is a lot of pain and trying to look for some relief. And as you alluded to, my journey didn't start for any particularly noble reasons. I got into meditation because I was trying to impress my college girlfriend who was into meditation. And yeah, I wouldn't even call them superficial aspirations. I just wanted her to think I was cool because I thought she
Right.
was really cool.
Mhm.
I was 20, I think 2021. And, and so I started meditating. I put it on my wall. Like I put all my New Year's resolutions on my wall and I wanted to make sure she saw. And one of them was like meditate 3 times a week for 15 minutes. I didn't even know how to meditate or hardly what meditation was,
Oh,
but
funny.
I knew she was getting into it. And then she broke up with me about 3 weeks later. So there wasn't a happy ending to meditate and get the girl storyline. But the different happy ending was that the pain of that breakup, then it was quite painful. It lasted for a while. It kind of sobered me into taking a different relationship to the meditation, because I was finding like the only thing that was actually giving me some relief uh, from the pain of that. And I did continue, even though I started with the meditation for superficial reasons. I kept going, and I was finding that there was a way to be in relationship with or be aware of the thoughts. The thoughts would come up of like whatever I would ruminate about everything I did wrong, or all the ways that I thought I was stupid, or I took this for granted, and what if I had only said that or done that. And I just like my mind would be consumed by it all day long. And so I remember in the meditation, the basic instructions, some of them were just like, see if you could watch thoughts move through the mind like clouds passing through the sky. So I was getting used to doing that in practice. And these thoughts that like seemed like they hated me or trying to ruin my life, just like, hello, thought. And I would, go through my mind like a cloud passing through the sky. But there was something incredibly freeing and spacious about that. It's like, oh, I can watch a thought. And if I can watch a thought, that means there's a thought and then there's an I. And that was like the first time I really began to make a distinction between the content of my experience and the observer of my experience. And at 21, that was it was revelatory. And I just remember then, like the next weeks walking around campus, I was like, how much in my experience can I be aware of without being consumed by? Mm-hmm. And, I'd feel sad and I'm like, oh, there's sadness here. And it wasn't disconnecting from it. I wasn't not feeling it. It was just noticing that this is an experience, but it's not the defining factor of me. And so that little doorway, that initial breadcrumb led to more breadcrumbs. And then the next one was like, well, this is making me happier. And it's the first time I feel like I have something that is like an internal thing that I can do that is shifting my experience of myself and my life, compared to, let's say, an external thing, which was most of my pursuit of happiness. Like try to pursue this and get really good at golf, which was my thing at the time, and improve my social life and set myself up for a good job, and like all of that. And none of that was shifting. I was just, in fact, at that point, a lot of that was shifting in a negative way. And yet I was getting more fulfilled. And so simultaneously, there was just everything kind of came to a head. I was studying business. We took this trip to the New York Stock Exchange, met with this big hedge fund manager. Everyone said, this is the guy, this is where you want to get, this is who you want to be. He gave this 2-hour talk and it just sucked my soul out of my body. And I just had the very clear thought of, I don't know what I want to do with my life, but I know I do not want to end up like this guy. And granted, he could have been super happy, maybe just had a bad day, came out of a colonoscopy, I have no idea. But the thing is that it triggered, for whatever reason, this insight at that particular time of just like, well, if that's not what I want, then what is it that I want? And it kept coming down to like, I want to be happy. At the heart of it, I just want to be happy. And then it's like, well, how do you do that? Well, you got to figure out what that is. And how do you figure out what that is? It's like, well, I'm doing this meditation thing and that seems to be working. And that just led to another breadcrumb, where I found out that, meditation is a thing and there's science behind it and there's ways to study it and you can go deeper into it and you can do trainings and you can go on retreats, and there's not just meditation, there's like psychology and the psychology of happiness. And it just opened up this whole world for me that was beautifully rich and continues to be beautifully rich. It was the beginning of my journey of understanding myself and what it might mean to find fulfillment and contentment in this life.
Oh, yes. So when I'm thinking of what's coming next in your story, I'm thinking you're now at this moment that you're making a choice. There's choice points in life, right? This is a choice point in Cory's life where he's not going to do the New York Stock Exchange. That's not fulfilling. He doesn't, there's no draw to that. And now he's realizing meditation is what fulfills him. So I understood, like when I heard your story about you being like into golf, you were like, I didn't just have one coach, I had like 10 coaches, because it would be like, I would always think someone else knew something better, or I'd learn something different from another, you were always searching to be better. Mm-hmm. So when I hear the next part of this story at this choice point is when you decide to go to Burma, I need to understand because there's 10-day silent meditations. There's not the 6-month where you go to a monastery and study and do what, 12 to 14 hours of meditation. Can you go to where that choice point was, where you're
Yeah.
like having to decide, like, I'm going to do, like, talking to your mom and dad, guess what? Now I'm going to go to Burma and be a monk.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. So this is where Cory's sincere interest in meditation intersects with Cory's very aggressive type A personality. So I went on my first 5-day retreat my junior year of college. I went with my mom and I went with my brother in upstate New York at a place called Omega. And it wasn't a silent retreat, but we were doing a decent amount of meditation. We were talking a lot, and it was like a place to share your inner world and have it be met and heard. And it was really powerful. And I remember coming out of that experience, for some reason, just having this feeling of like, I want to find the most intense version of this. There was an association with intensity and reward. And like, all right, so we were meditating like a couple hours each day here. Like, what would happen if you just did that all day long? And I didn't really know. I was hearing like people were sharing stories about monks and meditation teachers and proverbs um, and quoting the Tao Te Ching, and I was like gathering this stuff in my 21-year-old mind, and the mental representation of it was like, oh, go live on a mountain like for a year in silence. That's what I thought it was going to be. It's kind of like my version of Eat, Pray, Love, and I share that because it's really important to know that the intention was as vague as that. It's just like I want to see if I want to separate myself from everything that's currently bringing me comfort and sense of identity, and I just want to go deep in my inner world. But it was like sit on a mountaintop somewhere, and obviously it can't do that. But it started with that, and then over the next year, because of that intention, and because I kept filtering things through that intention, I would meet a teacher where I went to undergrad at Allegheny College, and here he was in a meditation. He'd say, oh, you should check out this other teacher who runs a meditation class at Allegheny. Like, didn't know that. So then I would meet with him and I tell him these aspirations, and he would say, it's like, well, you could go to places in the Northeast, and you can work there and you can meditate and do yoga. I was like, that's getting closer, but it's not quite it. Like, I think I want to go out of the country. I feel like if it's in the country and it's not hard enough, or if it's in the country, I might leave. Like, I just need to really separate myself from all of this. So I just kept following that thread. And after I graduated, I went on my first 7-day silent retreat in Barre, Massachusetts. And this is more along the lines of what you were talking about, where you have these like 10-day silent retreats. So you could go on, you meditate a bunch. I went on that one with my dad, who was interested in meditation. And it was there that I spoke to them, and I said, hey, like I have this desire to go really deep in this. What do you recommend? And they gave me a list of monasteries in Burma. They said, if you really want it to be intense, you should go to Burma. And if you really want it to be like a lot of meditation, a lot of intensity, you should go to this monastery right here, which was called Pandita Rama, with the teacher, the late Sayadaw U Pandita, who I didn't realize at the time was notorious around the world for being one of the most revered and respected and powerful meditation teachers, but also having a very demanding form of teaching. And so 6 months later, I was on a plane to Burma, got a meditation visa, a special visa so you could stay for long periods of time. But the choice point really was, I'm getting a lot out of this. I know I want to go deeper. I know I probably won't have many points in my life to do this. I have a bunch of college loans. I can defer them for maybe 6 months, a year. If I'm doing 15 minutes a day and it's going well, what would happen if I were doing 15 hours a day? And the prospect of that really excited me.
And that's a mindset. That's like something, like when I think about that, people have a struggle with doing 3 minutes a day. and then, but in your mind, like knowing what's in your soul, to crave that, to crave more,
Yeah.
and that call that you got to just go and, and to just dive so deep into your soul. Like, are you searching because that feeling of the shorter term meditations? It's really fulfilling you. Like, you just want to, what is it that you
It's a
feel like
great
it's going to give
question.
you more of?
Yeah, it's a great question because you had mentioned earlier that like I had found my fulfillment through meditation, or that was fulfilling me, and it's kind of that, and also not, because um, it wasn't like the meditation was giving me some relief from my experience, but it wasn't like I just loved going into meditation. I mean, I was still in college. I was throwing parties. Like, my life was, while there was, yeah, I went through a particularly hard point like junior year. There's a lot of things I was still like seduced by in my external world. There were a lot of shiny things, and I was 21 years old and enjoying it. So like sitting down on the cushion to meditate, it wasn't like I just want to spend all my time doing this. There were lots of times where I would set out, most of the time, I'd set out to do 30 minutes, in my room, and then I'd be like, oh, this is boring. And like 10 minutes later, I would leave.
Huh.
So there's a bunch of interesting things there. One, it was like the identity of being someone who meditated was compelling to me initially. So there was
Okay.
like some ego desires that were taking me deeper. And then also it was the promise of what the practice seemed to be making, which is that like if you do this more and more, your mind, you will soften the edges of your mind's relationship to your life. All of the prickliness of like, I don't like this, or I really want all this, that push-pull relationship, and that incessant never-ending treadmill that we seem to be on of just like, once I get that, then I'll be happy. Oh, it's not that. Once it's the next thing, more, more, more. I was already seeing enough of that to be disillusioned by it. And the meditation seemed to be a promise, like to actually teach you to cultivate a quality of contentment and equanimity with what's in front of you without losing aspiration. And I said, all right, that's compelling. But it was still hard. It was still a practice. It was not giving me momentary fulfillment when I did it. So these short meditations that kind of inspired this deeper thing, I was just getting enough of a glimpse to know there's something here, but I haven't even scratched the surface of what's here.
Hmm.
And I was reading books about, it was like non-self, that the self is an illusion and we're all one, and like the ego versus true nature. And I was just like, what are these words? I don't get them. I can't feel that in my experience, the all one experience, but I'm seeing it all over the place. So they must know something I don't know. And I figured if I put myself in an environment that forced me to do the work and that made it difficult to leave, that I would come to those understandings myself.
Wow.
So it was still like the aspiration of what the practice could be, not the momentary fulfillment it was giving me,
Hmm.
which yeah, is a distinction for whatever it's worth.
Right. Wow. It just, that whole your mindset into that, going to that level is just incredible to me.
Mm.
I mean, the dedication, the discipline, all the things. It's just like, it's very far and few between that you find somebody that has that mental capacity that actually is going to go do that for 6 months. Because listening to your story when you get there and what you do, which I want you to explain, takes it to the next level. Like,
Mm.
I can't imagine barely eating, barely sleeping.
Yeah.
So kind of explain that, because I think people need to understand it's not just going to sit and meditate with the monks.
Yeah. Yeah. It kind of is that, and it's also a lot harder than it sounds. But
Did you know it was going to be that hard, or what?
no,
Like,
no, no,
okay.
no. I don't think there. I think even just for any silent retreat, it's hard to understand the difficulty of just being with yourself. and being with everything that comes up, and intentionally turning toward it and not turning away, and not having your usual coping mechanisms of going on your phone or lots of food that you might like, or just like walking around and sightseeing or distracting yourself. Just like you go into a pressure cooker, and if you've spent a life not looking inward or actively using a future orientation to suppress being in the present moment, because the present moment carries wounds from the past, then there's going to be a lot that can come up when you start doing that work. So I did not know how intense it would be. I did know the intensity of the schedule, which was you wake up at 3 a.m., you go to bed somewhere around 9:30 or 10. You have to do a minimum of 14 hours of meditation a day, which includes it's an hour of sitting meditation and then an hour of walking meditation, which is this like very slow walking back and forth, like 10 feet in one direction and then turn around 10 feet in the other direction. So it's not like a walking around the monastery and looking at the birds. It's like, right, it kind of looks like a zombie walk. Your eyes are down.
And is that, so I was listening to that. So is that, what is the purpose of that short? Like, why can't you walk around and look at the birds? Because it has to be super,
because
no distraction.
It can easily become a sightseeing adventure if you focus too much on what could be seen. And it's not to dismiss the enjoyment of seeing things and looking around, and it's a different practice than meditation. It can be meditative. Like you can make like going on a beautiful walk and looking at the trees. You can do that with awareness, with spaciousness, with mindfulness, with gratitude. And that can be a form of practice. In the early stages, though, it can be very easy for us to just look around and then go, oh, there's a bird. Oh, I love birds. Oh, I should put a bird seeder on my house. Oh, wouldn't my house be so much better? Oh, my house is such a mess. Oh, I hate living in my, right? And that can happen, right?
Right.
So they call that, in Buddhism, they call that papancha. It's just the mental proliferation of the mind. One thought leads to another, leads to another. So you're trying to reduce those distractions, because it's hard enough to do the work. And also it's the recognition that it's like, yes, it's very pleasant, and it's probably nicer. It is nicer to want to look around and look at the sky than it is to be attuned to just one foot stepping after another. But it's also the recognition that like the work we're doing is to try to understand cultivating a certain quality of peace and contentment that is not constantly being fueled with an arrangement of external variables that fits everything you want. And so if you just keep following of like, oh, I want that. Now I have it. Now you're getting the dopamine reward hit of the mind that says, if I just had that, and then it gets it, and then it gets a reward, you refuel, you're fueling that cycle over and over. And that creates more tension in the experience, because now every time another desire like that arises, it carries extra tension to it because it's used to being fulfilled. So you make the practice simple. It's just like, all right, we're just going to walk back and forth. There's nowhere you need to go anyway. All we're doing is bringing the attention to the foot resting on the ground, and then the next foot touching the ground. And you're using that as a form of stabilizing your awareness and your attention and your concentration. The more you do that, the less the mind goes off into that papancha of just like this thought, that thought. And the more that stabilizes, the more you begin to see just like how much of your identity, how much your sense of being yourself is not actually yourself. It's your sense of being your thoughts and your emotions and your pains. And it takes some time, kind of like if you were to shake up a snow globe and you look in it, just like, yeah, it's just snow. I just see cloud snow. It's like, well, let's actually just put it on a stable surface for a bit. And then the snow starts to settle. And then you can actually see the image of what is actually being featured there. Oh, there's a house. And oh, there's a little person standing. Oh, there's a little light lamp. And so it becomes the same thing. We use these seemingly mundane things of just like, all right, focus on the foot or focus on the breath, where every normal person would go like, why would I want to do that instead of like looking at the sky or eating a cookie or like something else that's enjoyable or listening to music. And the whole thing is like, yes, all of that stuff is wonderful, but we often need to put it aside to actually let some of the noise and the distraction settle, to see what's going on beneath the surface. Who is the being behind all of the doing? And so as that concentration deepens, mind starts to settle and soften, and you get in touch with this place within you that is not your thoughts. It's not your emotions. It's not your pain, your suffering, your story. In that tradition, they call it awareness, or like your true nature. And it's the backdrop of your experience, and it's spacious, it's calm, it's radiant, it's inherently loving, compassionate, and you get to dwell there more and more and more. And you start to see so much of my life is just driven around these thoughts that I have about myself and not being good enough, or once I get that, then I'll be happy. And that is just happening subconsciously. And I've just been on a hamster wheel my whole life. And you also get to see, dwelling in that space, that it's not like you no longer do anything. Because a lot of people fear like, well, I'm just going to go meditate and like not do anything in the world. No, unless you choose to. I mean, you could go to monasteries or become a hermit, and more power to you. But what this is doing is just connecting us to a different place within ourselves that can motivate the action we're doing in the world. And how different would it be to like build a life or a career or a relationship, not from the place in your mind that's going, I need to do this because I'm unworthy, and once I get that, then I'll be fulfilled. Right? That's where most of us are building our lives from, versus the place in you that already knows you're okay, you're safe, you're loved, and you're good. And then like, what would it be like to build a relationship from that place, where you're not demanding the other person to be a certain way for you in order for you to feel okay, or incessantly having to work 80 hours a week in order to fill this inner emptiness that's like subconsciously tied to trying to impress your parents so they think you're great. Right. And so when that's driving the show, the outcome we get in our life will reinforce some of those wounds. And when we're connected to something deeper, then the extension of that and the life that gets built around that continues to invite that place within us out. Right. So when you're at the beginning of this 6-month journey, how long does it take you to get to that place where you almost you know how to get to that place quickly, and you live in that 14 hours and that one? Where you have trained yourself to really, not control your thoughts, but to really be within that spot, or whatever you call it. Yeah, in that the language space. Is so tricky. I know. In that space, how long does it take you a while to get there, or what? Yes and no. So I had some massive insights, beautiful, life-changing insights within my first few days of being there. Like what? Give me one. The first one was the distinction between primary pain and secondary pain. I was seeing that there was a ton of physical pain when I first got there. Pain in my knees, pain in my back. It felt like electricity moving through my body. It was just awful. We were sleeping on mattresses that you could squeeze between your finger and feel the bone on the other side. Not sleeping a bunch, and just the austerity of the retreat and the amount of meditation can create a lot of physical pain. And so I was just like consumed in the pain for the first handful of days, first week. And to the point where I almost left. Right. And I hit this point where I was like, all right, well, if you're going to leave, you could leave, but let's just see if we can try to just be present with the pain. Because my teacher kept saying, just be present. Just be present. That was this whole thing. The 3 words. Yeah. I was like, dude, I'm doing nothing but being present. I can't go anywhere else. I don't have my phone. It's just, I'm present with the pain all day long. But when I looked closer, I wasn't doing the work of being present. What I was doing was primarily ruminating about how much I hated the pain. And I saw this like very interesting, insidious mental loop where the pain would arise, feel the physical pain in my back. And then I would notice a thought arise, and the thought would be like, oh, here comes the pain again. How long is this going to last? I hate this. I hate being here. No one else looks like they're struggling as much as me. And then that thought would trigger an emotion of anger, or feeling like I was feeling victimized by my experience, or just sad. And then those emotions I could feel were actually making the physical pain worse, which was a very interesting thing to see. Like the emotional body was impacting the physical body. And then that would make the thoughts worse and more emotions. So it's just like this downward spiral. And I was like, all right, well, as long as I'm going to be here, I can't impact the physical pain. I can't shift the physical pain. I can adjust my posture, but it seems like it's going to be here. What I can do is shift how I relate to the physical pain. I can shift maybe the thoughts around it. And if I can do that, then I could shift how those thoughts are impacting the emotions, and the emotions are impacting the pain. And that was the first awareness of primary pain versus secondary pain. The primary pain is the pain of life that we really can't do anything about. So loss of a loved one, loss of a job, difficult things that happen that we didn't want to happen. These are primary pains. The secondary pain are the thoughts and the emotions that we layer on top of it. Why me? Why did God do this to me? How long is this going to last? It's going to be here forever. This always happens to me. And so seeing that very intimately in my experience, just like this is an example of primary pain, and this is an example of me caking on secondary pain. And that when I do that, it's as if the whole of suffering becomes greater than like the sum of its parts. It wasn't just like primary pain 1, secondary pain 1, 1 + 1 = 2. You swirl them together, it becomes like 3, 4, or 5.
Right.
And so that's where I just practice like, all right, cool. The pain is here. Can I just be with the sensations of the pain? And what is the sensation? All right. It feels like pins and needles in my back. It's throbbing. And like that would happen. And I'd notice the tendency, the pain to squeeze me up into the mind. And my mind would want to go, yeah, I hate that pain. So, all right. Just notice the thoughts. High thought, like a cloud passing through the sky. And then just back to the raw sensation. And the sensation itself wasn't inherently pleasant. I definitely liked being without that sensation more than I liked being with it. But I saw that there was a ton of extra pain and suffering that was being created through the thoughts and the emotions around it. And that I could actually turn up or down how much I was suffering based on how I was relating to the experience.
Right.
And so that happened within the first week of being there. As an example of like significant insights that can arise. Until the time where I had like very steady moment to moment presence and awareness, where I felt like I was dwelling in that the majority of the day, that was closer to like 5 months, 4.5, 5 months.
Oh, wow.
Now I was getting a lot closer along the way, but it's very hard to maintain that level of consistency throughout the day. Even in a monastery where that's all you're doing. So it takes a while for the mind to settle in that place. And I say that hopefully not to discourage all of us listening, but to hopefully just like cut ourselves some slack, because I don't dwell in that space all day long.
Right.
Like my partner and I get into arguments. I get emails that I don't like. I get off track. I get consumed in my phone. It's just like this. And being in real life is a lot harder in many ways than being in a monastery. There's so many things pulling at our attention. While there's a certain austerity and difficulty to the practices there, and it's like a different pain and like suffering there than I might experience here and outside of it. There's a whole host of other challenges that you don't have to contend with at all while you're in there.
Right.
And so, it's why I have a ton of respect for people doing this work in real life. And I even respect myself more trying to do this work in real life rather than kind of just fleeing back to monastic life, which is not to dismiss those who commit their lives to it. People often view that as a cop-out, and I don't take that orientation. I think you need people in the world who are just going into the inner experience to understand the depth of it and be able to share that with others and radiate that to others. it's just not my particular trajectory in this life.
Right. When did you start to realize oneness and your, like why we're here on this earth and why our souls chose to inhabit this human body? Like, do you go, what kind of went through your head? When did that start to make, like, oh, I get the oneness. I understand
Mm.
why I'm here.
Yeah. So I think some of those questions are still above my pay grade in terms of why exactly we're here. Actually, I definitely don't know that one at all. Like why we end up on this human plane and in these bodies that feel pain and pleasure and why they die. And then like all of that, I still have no idea who started this, why it started, where it comes from, where it's going. What and what's cool in the meditation traditions, like Buddhism as one example, is they don't actually occupy themselves with that question too much. It's actually not relevant. They kind of describe it as, if you were to get shot in the leg with an arrow, and you look down, and it's like, oh, there's an arrow in my leg. You wouldn't start thinking about, wait, before we take this arrow out, we have to know who made the arrow, where the arrowhead came from, who shot the arrow. It's like, no, there's an arrow. Let's figure out how to take it out.
Right.
And so where and why all of this is here and why we embody these bodies, I'm not fully sure. But there's a lot you learn by paying attention. And one thing that you start to see like that oneness, the sense of oneness, is that when you're not so occupied in your own thoughts and your own cravings and your own idea of where you're going and what you need to get and who you need to be and how you need to protect yourself, when the system has some space and like some safety to actually do some of this work and step aside from that place within you that we've been talking about, like true nature or awareness itself, has an inherent interconnectedness that is hard to describe. I found it very hard to describe even after experiencing, but I had a lot of experiences, and one very significant one around month 4.5, 5, when I was there, where just my sense of myself, a sense of any sort of separation, just completely evaporated. And it was just, I was sitting on this little bridge overlooking a muddy pond. And I just remember feeling completely in communion with all of it. There was no separation. And the extension of that was just a deep contentment, a deep space, deep peace, and a deep compassion. And just seeing like the sense of myself, that small sense of myself, just, it became everything. I don't dwell in there nonstop. I don't dwell in there to that extent, hardly at all, unfortunately. I have the glimpsing of it is a strong memory, and I'm closer to that space more than I was. Before that, it's hard when you're in the world and you're running a business and maybe you're a parent, and it's hard to have total non-self when you also have CoryMuscara.com. It's just like self.com. It's like also non-self. So, but all of that can be blended into it, and it was also the beginning of understanding that, yeah, it's one thing to see those spaces of what would be called non-duality, that like they're at the heart, maybe there's no separation, there is that oneness. And at the level of the human, like you being in a body, me being in a body, there is separation. And on this plane of reality, we have to navigate that separation. And you're going to have certain needs, I'm going to have certain needs. I would need to put up boundaries, you need to put up boundaries. And so some of that, this is where you can get what's called spiritual bypassing. When you taste that oneness, or you think that that's what you're supposed to have all the time, you end up trying to perform not having any needs. And,
Right.
you just go to the PTA meeting and you're working out a conflict, and, it's just the person's just like, I think we all just need to be calm and not be so triggered. And just like that person's probably pissed and they're suppressing their anger. So there's a role, and this is like what I find to be the hardest work of like, how do you honor that place in you that is spacious and connected and perhaps has the truth of all being interconnected, while also honoring the realities of having aspects of you that are very much separate. Um, and and so, to go back to your question, like the arising of those experiences of non-self, and oneness, and kind of like the purpose of everything, I was glimpsing a lot of that early on in the retreat. You could go on a 10-day retreat, you could have a regular meditation practice for 10, 20, 30 minutes a day and have glimpses of this. You don't even have to meditate, and people have glimpses of like that interconnectedness. So there's different ways to get that. But it really started to get more entrenched the longer I went on. And the one thing that I thought was interesting that seems to characterize this plane of reality, right, from the perspective of like, why do we come in to this form and this reality? Like, what's the purpose of it all? Again, I don't know the exact specifics of it, but I know one thing that seems to characterize it is that there's a desire, an innate desire to see things more clearly. There's a reward for understanding more clearly. We may resist that initially. We might have some very dense conditioning that kind of just wants to drown out with alcohol or substances, and it might seem like we don't want to see clearly. That's just a resistance to the initial pulse of pain that we would probably feel when we turn toward ourselves. But the actual experience of having understanding of why we do something, the experience of seeing that everything is impermanent, arising and passing away, the experience of seeing that you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions. There's inherent reward just to those insights.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the happiness of insight in meditation tradition. It's like there's something about that that's a reward unto itself. Why is that? Why is like growth and the pulse to expand and to see more clearly? I'm not sure, but it does seem to be something that characterizes this plane of reality, and if we just follow it, it will pull us into, my experience, like different lessons that are here for us to learn, and into relationships that we might have to work something out in, and into like another pattern that needs to be played out and worked through.
Right. Gosh, I could ask you more and more, but I want to get to when you got home and you were having dinner with your mom and dad, and your dad said, okay, now what are you going to do you have to go to work. Like, you have to make money.
Yeah.
And so I think what I love about this part of your story is, I saw how this 6 months you came back and you still had that, like, that not, you didn't react, but you were aware of that. Like so go there,
Yeah.
because a lot of your work, we're going to talk about the pillars of being present, because I want to explain that. And I also, so mindfulness and all that stuff. So can we go there?
Yeah, sure.
Cory?
So that was one of the first nights, or first 3 nights when I got home. I was still living at home, and as you said, my dad, he said it in a nice way, but with some of his anxiety of just like, I want to make sure my son doesn't still think he's a monk living in a monastery. He's like in the real world, and you can't live under this roof forever, like important things. But it was said in a way of just like, all right, so like, how are you going to figure out how to make money now? That it just like triggered my 13-year-old rebellious self that was just like, don't tell me what to do, Dad. I can do what I want. You're not the boss of me. And I was able to watch, right, those thoughts move through. And before, I probably would have collapsed into
Right.
the thoughts and the emotions and maybe said something, but I had the space to be more grounded and open. And that space of just noticing, all right, those are thoughts. This is a reaction. There's like a cause and effect. Dad said something, it hit something in me that created an emotion. Those emotions created more thoughts, which created more emotions, and it wants to inspire action. Can I just hold it, like watch the movie screen of all of this happening, relax around it, and then respond more intentionally, which, have been able to do much better since then, or with those skills. So it was also the recognition that, like, hey, it's one thing to do this work in a monastic setting where most things are taken care of for you and there's no familiar triggers and no familial triggers as well. There's another thing to do it in the real world in relationship with family. And family knows how to push buttons the most because they
Right.
put those buttons there to begin with.
Right. Exactly. So when we go to, you started teaching in a your friend's yoga studio. So we start to like, oh, I'm a teacher. I want to teach mindfulness,
Mm-hmm.
presence. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
you start getting people to teach, um,
Yeah.
continue
Yeah.
there.
There.
And then I want, yeah, go.
Yeah. I'm at wherever you want to take, right? We could go through the whole storyline, but yeah, came back and started teaching. Had 2 one-on-one clients. It all happened very fortuitously. Met some person while I was in a waiting room at a chiropractor's office. He heard me talking to someone at the front desk about my experience. He asked if I taught meditation. I said, I don't yet, but I can. And he became my first student, brought another person. And then things just slowly progressed from there. And
Right.
yeah.
So we talk about how you talk about face, the four
Mm-hmm.
pillars. And then when you talk about, so the interesting thing when I was reading that, as much as you talk about meditation and what the benefits and what you've learned being a monk, you don't tell people you don't have to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a big thing in you. Like you're not out there saying, this is what's gonna, you're gonna have to do this many minutes a day. You don't go there, and that's what I think is so fascinating. But I
Yeah.
think these pillars are part of that explanation.
Yeah, I don't feel too evangelical with it. The practice is there, and if someone wants it, it's a great resource, and it's a huge part of my teaching still. But I keep a pretty open and inviting space for that. These 4 pillars that you're referencing are I talk about in my book, like the 4 foundations of presence, of focus, allowing, curiosity, and embodiment. And when I tune into a moment of presence, these are the qualities that come up as like foundational for what it means to hold a moment of your life in a way that's spacious and attuned and grounded and receptive. And so focus just speaks to our ability to have some stability in our mind, the capacity to be attuned to what's happening on an inner and outer level. Most of us, again, we're kind of just like ping pong ball bouncing from one thing to another. So getting that stability allows us to actually stay rooted in our life as it's unfolding without just kind of going with wherever the wind's taking us. But you can be focused like here and still be maybe like resistant to what's arising. So that's where the A comes in, allowing. And this speaks to a certain inner spaciousness that we're taking in relationship to our experience, where it's easy, especially if we've been through some difficult things, to really close down to life, to close down our hearts. But when we close down to the painful things, we also close down to what's good, and we end up numbing ourselves, and that can lead to more depression or more anxiety. So a moment of presence is a willingness to be with the truth of what's here, a
Right.
softening into the truth of what's here, which is
The
where the
allowing,
allowing.
the
Yeah.
allowing was, it was so interesting when I was reading the book, was the story of the Zen farmer.
Oh yeah.
I had just gotten my daughter had a college, she's on the rowing team, and they ended up cutting the crew team like after she had applied and got on, and and she had written me this letter saying my biggest lesson in 2023 was that everything for me, everything, everything in my life, my successes, my failures. And it was just like, wow, Paige, that's amazing. But this is before she got her college rug got pulled out from under her. Right. But I said, Paige, you wrote that. It reminded me of the Zen farmer. Someone sends me the Zen farmer poem or story. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that is allowing. And I was teaching her that, and I've taught her that her whole life, like, the everything's working for you type, the bottom line of that. But when I'm listening to you explain allowing, and then you relate that to the Zen farmer, good luck, bad luck, who knows?
Yeah.
I was like, so I said that to Paige. I was like, good luck, bad luck, who knows? Who knows where you're supposed to be?
Yeah.
Like it's for a reason. But it's
Yeah.
just to live life, and I think raising children with that mind, that it's so powerful to have that instilled in you so early in life, to know that when something does feel like it's, you're like, what, that happened? Like,
Mhm.
wow, good luck, bad luck, who knows?
Yeah.
Right. I love it.
Yeah. For those wondering some of the context around that, there's this story of a Zen farmer, and he has a horse to till his fields. And one day the horse runs away, and all the people in the village come by and they say, "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry. It's such bad luck." And the farmer, to their surprise, goes, "Well, bad luck, good luck, who knows?" A week later, the horse comes back, but it brings another horse with it. So now he has double the help. And then all the people in the village say, "Wow, this is such good luck." And he goes, "Well, good luck, bad luck, who knows?" A few weeks later, the farmer's son, is riding the back of one of the horses, trying to tame it, falls off, breaks his leg. Everyone in the village says, "Oh, this is such bad luck." Farmer goes, "Bad luck, good luck, who knows?" A month later, the army's coming through town, and they're conscripting all the able-bodied young men, and they come across the farmer's son and they move on, and everyone in the village comes by and they say, "Wow, this is such good luck." And the farmer's response, "Good luck, bad luck, who knows?" So it's this whole idea of like, in life, we just don't know what something is going to lead to. And if I were to take a snapshot of difficult things and also good things at different stages of my life, there were many, many times where I was just very wrong about what they would lead to or what I could
Right.
predict they would lead to. And my 21-year-old self thought that breakup was the worst thing that could have happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it led to this path that has been the most rewarding thing I could imagine for my life.
Right.
Um, and so you just hear these stories all the time of just like some of the most difficult things for people end up giving them new perspective or inviting them like into a conversation with their soul that they wouldn't have done otherwise. Um,
I
Good
love
luck, bad
that.
luck, who knows?
I love that so much. So let's go to curiosity.
Yeah, so curiosity. Um, this is just that like this soft pulse of like leaning into our experience. Um, there's something particularly powerful about curiosity that it still continues to reveal itself as the years go on. But my experience of it as an internal energy is that it's the opposite energy of fear. So fear causes us to withdraw, pull back, it presupposes danger. Curiosity invites us in, pulls us closer, presupposes safety. And there's something interesting about just like making the intention to be curious about what's coming through your experience that really shifts the orientation from one of bracing resistance to one of inviting, and even seeing like, what might this be trying to show me? It's also the thing that kind of like pulls us a little closer to our experience, being curious when you're talking to someone or when even just like curious about the flavors of your food, just brings you a little closer to your experience in a way that yeah, a moment of presence can be characterized by. And then the last one is E for embodiment. And this is to make sure that our presence just doesn't live primarily up in our head, that we are in bodies as humans, and you might be frustrated with your body or not like everything the body feels or experiences throughout the day and life, and yet to try to disconnect from it would be to suppress a lived part of your reality. And there are many people in contemplative meditation spaces who can use these practices to try to disconnect from their body. And so we have to remember, like, our whole experience of life is happening through the body. Our experience of joy is happening here. Our experience of fear is happening here. Our experience of needing to put up a boundary is being informed by what's coming up in the body. And so when we're looking at presence, we have to make sure we're not just thinking of it as this mental awareness type thing, but that the awareness extends throughout this entire organism.
Yeah, I love that. I want to end on, I know you just got married,
Mm-hmm.
and in Bainbridge Island, my friends that listen from Washington, I was reading your post on Instagram, and I had heard, I've been listening, like I said, to all the podcasts I can about with Brianna, that it was 5 years and you broke up and you've gone through a lot. How does Cory, how do you come from, what you have experienced, and what does she bring to you that it was like, oh, this is it. Like, I know, but what was that? How do you bring into a relationship with you? Like, what were your values that were super, like, really high on your list that you found in her, and how that all came to this beautiful wedding?
Yeah, we had quite a journey, but I mean, there were certain there were things in the beginning that really drew me into to Brianna. There was a way that she kind of embodied herself in space, like when I met her at an event, and I could just feel that she didn't care what anyone was thinking about. She was just like in her own world in a really sweet way. It wasn't selfish. It was just like comfortably in herself. And I remember being very drawn to that. It didn't feel like there was a graspiness or wanting to be seen in a certain way. It was just, it was magnetic. And so there was something about that level of embodiment and attunement to her own world and comfort in her world that that really drew me in. And there's much more I could say, of course, but we had a wild journey of finding our way to what I would call like the truth of being together. And when I use that word truth, I use it to describe the knowing that can come from that deeper place within us that I've been alluding to. And to me, what's characterized by that place is it's spacious, it's clear, it's not sensational, it's not trying to argue you into something or against something. It's just, there's just like this spacious knowing. And and there was something deep that was pulling us into the relationship, but there was a lot of clutter. And Brianna's 7 years older than me. We had an age difference. We lived on opposite coasts. We both had different forms of growing up and finding ourselves, and finding like how we work together. And we followed the thread of that. Like anytime we'd hit something that was uncomfortable, we'd lean into it and try to understand what was going on, and it would open up new layers and new dimensions. But there was a while where it wasn't hitting that thud of knowing, that deep knowing that I especially was looking for. And anyway, so we broke up, and it was the most painful thing that I'd ever gone through. And I had said, the only thing that I'm more afraid of than losing you is losing myself. And if I go into this relationship from this place, like as much of me that wants to make this work, there's this block that I can't figure out. And if I override it, then I will lose myself because it's the deepest thing I can access.
Hmm.
Um, and so we took space and separation, and then to condense the storyline a bit, or the timeline of it, I had a really significant insight around a part of me that was kind of protecting and guarding against intimacy and commitment, even though my mind knew I wanted a committed relationship. And saying that since I was a kid, I want kids, I want to be married, like
Huh.
I wanted that full on board. But there was some deep learning, and I tracked it to a handful of experiences when I was young, that just associated getting too close as potentially getting hurt. Um, and there's something very intimate about like a committed relationship. And so like a lot of the stuff that was coming up, or painful things that were coming up, instead of them being woven into just like the flow of this is what it means to be in a relationship, there was a lot of that had the space for the highs and lows, but there were some things that just felt like that was creating this contraction in
Huh.
me. And anyway, that contraction was the thing that like felt blocked when I would come up against like thinking about proposing. And I watched this shit. Once I saw it clearly, I watched it kind of melt away. It was like this thawing
Huh.
around my heart. And once it did, and I thought about proposing, it was like, oh, of course. It was
Wow.
like a complete shift. And so we did a lot of work to get to a place where it was like, all right, I think we're ready, but there was still this final thing for me. And then once that shifted, it was just a no-brainer. And it wasn't the understanding that like it's all going to be rainbows and unicorns. It was basically seeing the part that was afraid of kind of going in fully with someone and not being able to get out, because not being able to get out was associated with pain.
Huh.
Um, and
And
so
that was childhood stuff. You
yeah, there was
went
some
down that.
childhood stuff around
Huh.
that.
Isn't
Not
that?
even not even super tragic or traumatic, but just some learnings in relationship with, especially like young boys, um, of just like doing things that were uncomfortable to my more sensitive nervous system, and just feeling like I just want to get out of here. Um, so
Hmm.
there was an association with like being in discomfort and not being able to get
To get
out.
out.
That was, and it was all subconscious. For anyone who's interested in like that as an idea, or where you might have parts of you that are protecting or defending, I do recommend the book No Bad Parts by Richard Schwartz, because it will go into how we have these parts that develop at different stages in our life that are designed to protect us, but they can feel like the truth of us. And that's the distinction, is that sometimes it's not the true self. It's actually a part telling you just like, hey, you shouldn't do this.
So you
Uh,
read that book while you were going through that? How,
yeah, I did. And it was that book and some other things. I worked with a therapist for a bit and a handful of coaches, and it was a lot moving in the background for years, but things kind of like coalesced in this one moment of just like having this really big insight. And it really felt, it was like a thawing
huh.
out. And yeah, over the next couple of weeks, I just watched it open up more and more and more.
Wow.
It felt, it had two things. It felt like a curse was lifted. That was the first experience of it. And people who do internal family systems, that work of IFS, describe like when a part steps aside, it often does feel like a curse is lifted. And it also just had the resonance of a miracle. It was like everything that I
Huh.
wanted to feel.
Wow.
I was like, oh, this is it. And
Wow.
I did
Really?
the work to get there. Yeah.
Huh.
It was the most incredible thing I've ever experienced.
And then you just call her and say, I had a miracle. Let's go.
Pretty much. Yeah, there's a lot there about what happened next. But once I had that clarity, yeah, 2 days later, I got on a plane from
You
Mexico to
did?
San Francisco and arranged for us to meet up. And we had a little bit of back and forth to build up, so it wasn't out of nowhere. And we had been talking, on and off during the time we were broken up, but we were never fully disconnected. Like, we tried, but the force was there, bringing us together, and it was just a lot of stuff that needed to be cleared out. But it was, and this is an important point for me, it was the willingness to walk away, that and for us to like surrender. It's like, maybe this is not going to work, to really allow that to be the potential truth, that created enough spaciousness so that that part that was in that bind didn't feel so pressured to like have to make a decision. And when it like was able to soften, that's when I could see it as a part,
Right.
and then reorient to it differently, and allow it to shift.
Oh, I love that. To think of more people did that work before they got married, like before they did. I mean, it's just like incredible.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, incredible.
Mm.
Oh, Cory, I could talk to you all day. So your book, Stop Missing Your Life, your website, your classes, there's so many that are amazing. In fact, I found you through a friend that is taking your classes,
Oh, cool.
and she was showing me on her phone your app, and I go, gosh, that is so amazing what you have created.
No, thank
Yeah,
you.
it's just, you've really, like I said in the beginning, like, I know I've met you, I've learned so much from you, and I just appreciate this time, and I know you're busy, and I just was so excited to uncover your magic, because there's so
Mm.
much.
Thanks, Ashley. Thanks for
Any
doing the
lot.
work that you're doing,
Oh,
and bringing different voices on your platform, and sharing and curating. It's big work to do that, and it's a lot to prepare for. However, doing hundreds of interviews like this, it's a lot.
right.
So thank
But I
you.
love it. So that's,
Yeah.
it doesn't feel like
Beautiful.
it's a lot, especially when I meet someone like you and get to read your book. And I was thinking, um, Permission to Be Human.
Mm.
Wasn't that the name of the book you wanted? That's what
Yeah,
title you
that's what I
wanted.
wanted to call it.
Is that more resonates with you after I heard that, than
Yeah.
Stop Missing Your Life? Because that would be like the opposite of what it's funny, but I get why a publisher wants to make that stand out on the bookshelf. But
Yeah.
Permission to Be Human, I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I was texting with my literary agent yesterday about trying to change the book title.
Oh,
So,
really?
yeah,
Oh,
which is a
funny.
huge thing to do. Nobody ever really does, but
Huh. So it
yeah,
bugs you that much.
it uh, because of things like you just shared. Like, once you get to know the content, like I would never say to someone, "Stop missing your life."
Right. That's what I mean. It's not you. That's
It
what
doesn't, yeah.
right.
And there's an argument that it stands out, and books
Right.
maybe designed to stand out, and some people find it inviting, like, stop missing your life. I I find it a little strong, and there's enough people who have read it now who like know the essence of the book. When I talk to them and I say like permission to be human, they're like, "Oh, that feels
Right.
like it."
Yeah, that's what I felt too. That's funny.
So
But
maybe
it's
it'll get a
it's
rebrand
all
one
good.
day. Yeah.
But you're going to write another book, so
Yes. Yeah.
I know that's coming.
Soon.
Anyway, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashley.
Oh, you're so welcome. I appreciate this.
Yeah.
Until next time.